Hello, everybody. In this video lecture, we will cover the very first chapter of the anatomy and physiology, and we will talk about introduction, homeostasis, and some important anatomy language. And to do so, I will use PowerPoint. I'm gonna share the screen with you. So this is a PowerPoint that I will use. And I think I will record two videos because this PowerPoint is long. It's not extremely long. I think it's like 66 slides. Yeah, so I don't want these videos to be very long. So probably you will have video lecture part 1 and part 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. So anatomy is the study of the structure of body parts and their relationship to one another. And physiology is the study of the function of those body parts, how they work together to carry out life-sustaining activities. So you learn the structure first in anatomy, and then you will learn how the structure functions. Subdivisions of anatomy. One branch of anatomy is gross or macroscopic anatomy. And macroscopic anatomy is the study of large visible structure. And it can be divided into regional anatomy that looks at all structure in a particular area of the body. Let's say you can study the area of neck and head, or it can be thoracic region or abdominal region of the body. That would be subject of regional anatomy. System anatomy looks at just one system, like cardiovascular, nervous, reproductive, digestive, and so on. Another branch of gross anatomy is surface anatomy. Surface anatomy looks at internal structure as they relate to overlying skin. Many bony structures, for example, can be palpated through your skin. And we use them as landmarks. We call them anatomical landmarks. And when you know these anatomical landmarks, it allows you to understand what internal structure is related to this landmark, right? Let's take, for example, a rib cage. So on this picture over here, you see the rib cage, ribs, and the sternum. But this line over here, between number 11 and 12, this is called sternal angle. You can palpate sternal angle on your own body because it will be like a little bump somewhere in this area. So that's anatomical landmark. So this anatomical landmark help you to understand that in this area, the second rib is attached to the sternum, and this is where the base of the heart located, right? So knowing the anatomy of the external structure help you to understand underlying internal organs location. That's what surface anatomy is. Another big branch of anatomy is microscopic anatomy. So what we talked about previously was macroscopic anatomy, something you can see with your naked eye. Microscopic anatomy, you need to use microscope, and it deals with structure too small to be seen by naked eye. Two major parts of microscopic anatomy is cytology and histology. Cytology is microscopic study of cells, and histology is microscopic study of tissues. Now, the question is, what is tissue? Well, tissue is a group of cells that perform common function, right? So on this picture over here, you can see a cell, skeletal muscle cell. It's actually called skeletal muscle fiber. And then the whole bunch of this cell make the tissue that will be skeletal muscle. And the tissue, skeletal muscle, and some other tissue like connective tissue and nerves and blood vessels will make an organ such as your skeletal muscle. I hope it makes sense, right? So microscopic anatomy, cytology, and histology. Developmental anatomy studies anatomical and physiological development through life, and embryology is part of it. And embryology study development before birth. All right, so what does it mean to study anatomy? To study anatomy means that you know anatomical terminology, you are able to make observations, manipulations, you're able to palpate some structure and auscultate. And auscultate means you can hear the sound that normally working organ, or maybe organ that is damaged by some disease, produce while they carrying on their functions. Radiological anatomy, that's a branch of anatomy that is very modern, and it uses different scans or images of the body. And we can use different type of rays to see this internal structure. So let me pick up the pointer. I think pointer just make more sense. So, so some of the scans they're using X-rays. So we can use X-rays to see bones and teeth. So X-rays are good for hard tissue. If you want to see soft tissue using X-ray, you need to use a special chemicals, special dyes. So example would be angiogram. So angiogram is an image. It's a radiological image that uses X-ray. So angiogram uses X-ray. But angiogram is used to see blood vessels. And blood vessels are soft tissue. So to see the blood vessels, a special dye is used, and then those blood vessels became visible. So over here, if you look at this diagram, you can see renal angiogram. So you can see these blood vessels that supply blood to a kidney. Another type of imaging technique is CT or CAT scan. CAT scan also uses X-ray, and it produces planes of the body in 360 planes. So different sections. For example, over here, you can see cross section of the thoracic region using a CAT scan. Another branch of radiological anatomy is MRI. MRI does not use X-ray. It uses magnetic resonance image. So it uses very hard magnet, and MRI often used for brain images. However, because MRI uses magnetic field, very strong magnetic field, it cannot be used on person with pacemaker or any metal joint or any metal part in his or her body. Ultrasound. Ultrasound is the safest. It produces image that called sonogram. So here you can see sonograms of the uterus, uterus over here. And echocardiogram is also image, it's image of the heart and blood vessel using ultrasound. And ultrasound is the sound with very high frequency of sound waves. PET. PET scan or positron emission tomography. This one uses the special radioisotopes that are injected into a body, and then they emit particles, and those particles collide with electrons and release gamma rays. So PET uses gamma rays, and those gamma rays are detected by a computer, and computer produce the image. So over here, you can see image done by PET scan, comparing with the image of the same area done by CT scan. PET scan are used to study function rather than structure. So over here, you can see the cancerous cells in this area, right? And on a CT scan, now it's hard to see anything, but it's became very visible using a PET scan. So physician will decide which type of technique is the best for the patient. Usually when somebody is admitted to a hospital, they do a CAT scan first because, or CT scan, because it's a quick procedure and it's a cheaper procedure. And it gives you the first results, and then based on diagnostics, physician will recommend another type of the scanning technique if it's needed. Okay, so the next topic of this chapter is physiology, of course, because everything that we discussed previously was about anatomy. Now, physiology also can be divided into several branches. One of them is cellular physiology. And from word cellular, you can understand that that's the one that study processes within cells. Physiology is actually biochemistry and biophysics. So that's why physiology of the cells study biochemical and biophysical processes occurring within cells. So what would be example of such processes? Cellular respiration. If you took general bio class, you already know that cellular respiration is the biochemical process that happens inside cells and produce ATP. And ATP is needed for energy. Another example, active transport, or protein synthesis, or DNA replication. That's all example of cellular physiology. Systemic or organ physiology works together with systemic anatomy and study physiological processes within the body and how different body systems work together to keep your internal environment constant. And constant internal environment is called homeostasis. So systemic physiologists study body systems and how they keep homeostasis of your body. So subdivisions of the systemic physiology are based on 11 organ systems: integumentary, skeletal, muscular, nervous, endocrine, cardiovascular, lymphatic, immune, respiratory, digestive, urinary, reproductive. And if you look here, lymphatic, immune, it's interesting because in anatomy, they call this system lymphatic system. In physiology, they call the same system immune system. That's why it has this dash over here. So that's systemic physiology. Anatomy and physiology are inseparable. Function always reflects structure, and what a structure can do depends on its specific form. This principle is known as principle of complementarity of structure and function. And it does make sense. If you know, your muscles, for example, your skeletal muscle cells are long and multinucleated, well, and their function is to contract, right, to move your bones. So if you have a long cell, it makes sense when it contracts, it's getting shorter, right? And that's what produces tension that allow you to move your body parts, right? You cannot imagine your skeletal muscle cells being just nice and round. This structure would not fit with its function. Also, when we look at human body, it's very organized from the smallest chemical level to whole organism level. And you can see here levels of organization from the smallest to the largest. So we start with chemical level, atoms, molecules, organelles, then cellular level, single cell, then tissue level, and tissue is groups of similar cells, then organ levels. And what is organ? Organ is actually any anatomical structure of your body that contains two or more types of tissues. For example, if we take a membrane and we will study serous membrane or mucous membrane, and you will learn that a membrane is made from connective tissue and epithelial tissue, then it's a simple organ. We will study your skin, and skin is cutaneous membrane. And skin is made from more than one tissue type. It's made from epithelial, connective, it has nerve tissue, it has muscle tissue. You will learn about erector pili muscle in the dermis of your skin. So skin is an organ because it's made from more than one tissue type. Then organs make organ systems. Organ system is a group of organs that work closely together. Let's say if it is your respiratory system, you will have your trachea, you will have your lungs, right? You will have a pleura that's surrounding the lungs. That will be the organ system. And then these 11 organ systems that we just discussed make an organism. They make organismal level. So those are all organ systems combined to make the whole organism. So this is a picture that just represents what we just discussed, right? You break human body apart and you will end up with chemical level, right? Those atoms make molecules, organelles, cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and all organ systems together make you. Now, necessary life functions. We have 8 major functions that necessary for life, for living organisms. The first one is maintaining boundaries. Boundaries between internal and external environments. And this includes plasma membrane, that actually a boundary of every single cell in your body, or skin, that is the membrane that cover your body. Another function is movement. Movement, you can move your body parts. That's what your skeletal muscles do. You can move different substances inside your body. That's what your, for example, cardiac cells do. Your heart contracts and it acts as a pump and it pushes blood through your blood vessels. But movement is even more than just movement of the large substances. What need to be moved? Nutrients need to be moved inside a cell, and waste products need to be moved outside of the cell. This is also part of the movement, and of course it's necessary for life. Responsiveness. Responsiveness is the ability to sense and respond to stimuli, right? So if you're sitting in your house and you smell some fire, right? That's your stimuli. And you should be able to respond to the stimuli. You should be able to get up and get out of your house, right? So that's functions that necessary for your life. Responsiveness can be also done by a reflex. When you don't really put an effort to respond, but your nervous system, your skeletal system, or your endocrine system, they respond for you, right? But anyway, to be considered a living organism, you should be able to respond to stimuli. Digestion. Well, digestion allows us to get nutrients. Digestion is breakdown of a food, right, into nutrients, and then absorption of these nutrients into blood. So when you eat your hamburger will be digested first in your stomach, in your small intestine, and then nutrients will be absorbed into your bloodstream and delivered to every single cell of your body, to your nerve cell, to your kidney cell, to your liver cell, right? And without digestion, it wouldn't be possible. Metabolism. Metabolism, students very often think about metabolism as digestion. That's not the same. They confuse metabolism with catabolism, because when you digest your food, it's catabolism. Catabolism, when you break, or of course not you, but your cells, when your cells break large molecules into smaller building blocks, that's catabolism. Example would be, yes, digestion of food. But metabolism also includes anabolism. So when you do your exercises and you grow your muscles, big muscles, right? That's what anabolism is. Anabolism, when your body builds larger molecules from smaller building parts. And metabolism include all chemical reactions that occurs in your body, both catabolism and anabolism. Another function necessary for life is excretion. Excretion is the removal of waste from metabolism and digestion, right? So when you eat your food, of course, you cannot digest and absorb all of it. Some will be excreted in the form of feces. When your cells produce ATP, they break glucose, they make ATP molecule, but byproduct is actually, in this example, would be carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide needs to be removed from your body, right, through the excretion. Another necessary function is reproduction. And of course, reproduction includes production of offsprings, but not only this, we need cellular reproduction, cellular division for growth and repair. Some of your cells just get damaged because of just regular metabolic processes that happen in your body. For example, in your stomach, you have very strong acid in your stomach, and some of the epithelial cells that cover the stomach will get damaged. So you cannot just live 50, 60, 70 years without repair. So to repair those damaged cells, you need other cells, adjacent cells, to divide and replace the ones that are damaged. For growth, we all started as one single cell that is called zygote, and then this cell divides, and you became bigger. Right? So that's why our last function here that is necessary for life is growth. Growth is increase in size of a body part of an organism. Even cells, when cells are just born, when they're born from pre-existing cells, they are smaller, right? Everything is smaller when they just born, and then they get bigger. Okay, so let me kind of go over it very quickly so you didn't lose the track of what we were covering. We were talking about functions that are necessary for life, maintaining of boundaries, movement, responsiveness, digestion, metabolism, excretion, reproduction, and growth. Okay, next is survival needs. So I'm gonna pick up my pointer again. So survival needs includes nutrients. I already mentioned what nutrients are. Nutrients are chemicals for energy and cell building, and you get these nutrients by digestion process of your food. So you digest food into nutrients. So example of nutrients include carbohydrates, fats, proteins, minerals, vitamins, nucleic acids as well. It would be nucleotides. Right? Another necessary element for your survival is oxygen. So from the moment you are born, till the very last breath, right? You deliver this oxygen into your cells. Your cells absolutely require oxygen, especially your nervous cells. Neurons can only live a couple minutes without oxygen. But why do you need this oxygen? Why is this so important? Because oxygen is used in the process of ATP production, right? Cellular respiration is a breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen to synthesize ATP. And ATP is just necessary for your body functions. So oxygen is needed for ATP production. Water. Water is the most abundant chemical in the body. It's a site of chemical reaction, and life cannot exist. Well, at least the life that we know cannot exist without water. Actually, when we're looking for a life on a different planet, we are looking for water, because we believe if we can find a water on a planet, there is a possibility that life also exists. I would say water and life are inseparable. Another need for survival is normal body temperature. Normal body temperature is extremely important for chemical reactions within your body. You know, they tell you if your fever goes above 104, you need to call emergency. You need to go to emergency room. And you would ask yourself, 104, it's not that bad. Sometimes we have 110 and 115 air temperature outside, right? Like, especially if you live in a desert area here in California, sometimes temperature goes to 120 temperature, you know, of the air. But it's so dangerous for your body temperature to go up, because high temperature can damage your proteins. It's called protein denature. When proteins are damaged, all chemical reaction shuts down, right? And it can be very dangerous because it's irreversible. If protein loses its structure, it might never go back to normal. That's why, of course, body temperature is a survival need. And another one, I don't know, you might be surprised, might not be, it's appropriate atmospheric pressure. Yeah, we cannot survive with a very low or very high pressure, and it's necessary for breathing and gas exchange in the lungs. So if you don't have normal breathing and gas exchange, you don't get enough oxygen, right? And here's our oxygen. It's also part of our survival needs. Okay, now homeostasis. Homeostasis is the most important word in physiology. And that means your body is capable of maintenance of a relatively stable internal environment despite continuous outside changes. Homeostasis is dynamic state of equilibrium. What it means everything inside your body is actually want to change. It's changing every single minute of your life. It's never stable. It's, you know, let's say your heart rate, it goes up and down, right? Or your blood pressure, or your breathing rate, or even your glucose level. If you eat a big piece of cake, of course, the sugar level or glucose level in your blood goes up. That's okay. It's not about how this equilibrium is disrupted, it's how you can return back to a normal state. That's why it's a dynamic equilibrium. So you kind of like having these little problems always, and then your body system work together to return everything back to normal. So, and homeostasis involve continuous monitoring and regulation of many factors that we call variables. The two major systems that are responsible for your homeostasis are nervous system and endocrine system. We call those system of control. But of course, nervous and endocrine system can do nothing without your muscle system, right? Without your, I don't know, excretory system, your urinary system, your cardiovascular system. But those are systems that monitor and control your other body system and give them kind of like instructions on how to keep this homeostasis. So when we're looking at the control mechanism, right, in a homeostatic control, we call it reflex arch. And control mechanism for homeostasis include receptor or sensor, and this will be an organ that monitors the environment. This is the organ that responds to stimuli. And what is stimuli? Stimuli is any change outside you. So receptor or sensor will monitor the environment and respond to the change in the environment. Then you need a control center, and control center determines the set point at which the variable is maintained. Control center gonna receive input from the receptor. So receptor gonna send signal to the control center. Control center already have this set point, right? Let's say set point for your glucose level. And if your sugar level goes up or down, right, your control center will determine the appropriate response. And you need effector. Effector receives output from control center, provides the means to respond, and response act to reduce or enhance the stimulus. So effectors, you don't have that many effectors really in your body. The only effectors in your body are muscles and glands, right? So all type of muscles, skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, they are effectors because they can do something about that stimulus. Muscles can contract. And another effectors are your glands, both endocrine and exocrine glands, because they also can do something when environment change. They can secrete their product. So we have only muscles and glands that are your effectors. So here's our example. So here your body is balanced, and this balance we call homeostasis. So when stimulus, and stimulus is any change, let's say outside temperature goes up. So you're sitting inside your room and you have your air conditioner and the temperature is nice and like, I don't know, 68 degrees. Now air conditioner broke down and the temperature goes to 70, 75, 80, 95, right? It's getting hot. So the change in temperature is the stimulus. Now you need some receptors, and those receptors will be temperature receptors in your skin that will sense the change, right? So the first, what's going on over here? Temperature goes up. Now it's imbalance. Well, now you need a receptor. So receptors will detect this change. So special sensors in your skin will detect the change in outside temperature. Now these receptors gonna send signal to control center. In this example, control center will be your brain, right? So hypothalamus specifically, right? So, but let's take it easy. Receptors send signal to your brain, and your brain will be control center. And we call it input. So information sent along afferent pathway to control center. So this pathway is called afferent. Afferent is a kind of, when I look at A remind me an arrow that goes up. So it pretty much goes towards something. So it goes towards the control center. So this is called afferent pathway. Now your control center, your brain, it already has like a little sensor inside. It knows that your body temperature need to be 98.2, right? That's a set up temperature. That's a normal. That's a balance. Now you receive information that, ooh, the temperature goes up, right? Now your control center gonna analyze this information and make a decision what need to be done. And then control center gonna send the command to the effector. We call it output. So output is when information is sent along efferent pathway to receptor, right? So this is efferent pathway. So we go from control center to effector. Now what your effector gonna do, let's take, in this example, your effectors will be your sweat glands. Sweat glands start release sweat. You are sweating and your sweat evaporates and it cools down your body, right? So that will be your response. So effector would be your sweat gland, response would be you sweating. Sweat glands release their product, sweat. So response of effector feeds back to reduce the effect of the stimulus, right? So we go down. So we went up, temperature goes up, now we want it to go back down to the balance and return variable to homeostatic level. I hope this makes sense, right? So what we described right now is example of negative feedback. So negative feedback is when the response reduces or shuts off the effect of the original stimulus. So what was original stimulus? High temperature, right? Temperature inside your room goes up, your body temperature goes up, right? What was your response? Sweating, right? So that shuts down the original stimulus. So temperature goes up, you want temperature to go down. That's why it's called negative feedback. And negative feedback is the most common and essential for maintaining homeostasis. An example would be regulation of body temperature that we just described. You also can regulate a blood volume by ADH, and this is called antidiuretic hormone, and this would be endocrine mechanism. So either your nervous system, so what it's about, either your nervous system as a control center or your endocrine system can be your control center. Right, that's why we call it nervous mechanism or endocrine mechanism. Okay, so here you can see the example of negative feedback, how your body regulate temperature, right? And it shows you both example, when your temperature goes up or when your temperature goes down. So when we regulate the blood volume, then you have, again, you have stimulus. Let's say your blood volume drops. Why would your blood volume drops? Well, one reason why your blood volume drops can be bleeding. So let's say you have external or internal bleeding, you're losing your blood pressure drops. Or your blood volume drops and your blood pressure drops. So that would be your stimuli. Now you need receptors that will sense decrease in the blood volume. Then you need control center, and control center will be in a hypothalamus and specifically pituitary gland that will release this antidiuretic hormone. And antidiuretic hormone causes kidneys, that's eye factor, to return more water to blood. Right, so that would be our negative feedback and the way how your body regulates your blood volume. We do have positive feedback. So the positive feedback is a response that enhances or exaggerates the original stimulus. And very often it has the amplifying effect. What would be example? Example would be enhancement of labor contraction by oxytocin. Now, when female goes through labor, especially through labor contraction, your body start releasing special hormone that is called oxytocin. It's actually released by posterior pituitary gland. This gland is inside your cranial cavity. So oxytocin is released, and what oxytocin does, it's actually make uterus to contract. So labor, it's already labor. Uterus, it's already contracting. You don't want this contraction to stop until baby is born, right? You don't want somebody to go into labor, start contraction, and then contraction stop. That would be negative feedback. You have something, contraction, you reduce it. You don't have contraction anymore. That's not good, right? And if any of you had babies, you know that's not a good sign when contraction stops. That's why when contraction begin, oxytocin is released that even makes those contractions stronger, and more oxytocin release and makes this contraction even more stronger, right? So that kind of exaggerate the stimulus. That's what positive feedback is. So it's not that common, but we do rely on the positive feedback in a very important part of our life, such as giving a birth. Another example of positive feedback would be platelet plug formation and blood clotting. So when you cut yourself and you start bleeding, that's actually a dangerous situation because you can bleed to death. You're losing blood, pressure goes down, all organs shut down. So your body gonna fix it. What they gonna do? They're gonna form this plug from platelets. And those platelets will release more and more platelet factors that will attract more and more platelets. So very quickly, you hopefully will take care of this injury and you stop bleeding. Yeah, I think this is the example of the positive feedback, and they use this platelet plaque formation, right? So here you have injury to blood vessels, the blood is leaking out, all right? And now look over here, you see how those platelets, they aggregate over here? And it's not just one or two, we have many, many of them forming this plug. And when first, actually you have like the first platelet that attaches, right? And then these platelets start releasing special chemicals, right, shown here in green, that attract more and more and more platelets. So now we have a good amount, right? We can seal this cut, right? So that exaggerates the effect, right? More platelets, more chemicals, more platelets, more chemicals, and the better this plug is. So that's example of positive feedback. Okay, let me go and see how far did we go. So I think we're gonna cover one more, and then the rest of the material will be covered in the next lecture. So homeostatic imbalance. Homeostatic imbalance is a disturbance of homeostasis, and this increases risk of disease, contributes to changes associated with aging, and may allow disruptive positive feedback mechanism to take over, right? So it means, for example, heart failure, what would positive feedback does? So condition getting worse and worse and worse, right? That's what happens if we have imbalance of homeostasis. Okay, so the rest of this chapter will include body systems and some language of anatomy, and I will cover it in our next video lecture. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope it was helpful.